The storm raged through the quiet coastal town of Havenport, rain slashing against the streets like unforgiving whips of fate. Ben Walker didn't believe in miracles. Not after the struggles of raising his son alone. Not after years of watching dreams slip through his calloused fingers. But that night, everything changed. A lost little girl, shivering in the rain. A mother who would move mountains to find her. And a man who never expected to become a hero. What started as an act of kindness turned into something far greater. A battle against power, a fight for freedom, and an unexpected journey toward love. Because sometimes the family you save becomes your own. Love-gripping, heartfelt stories with action, suspense, and deep emotions. Don't miss this incredible journey of fate, love, and second chances. Subscribe now and join us for more unforgettable stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit that follow button so you never miss the next adventure. And now let's dive into a story where one act of kindness changes everything. A struggling single dad took in a lost child. Unaware she was the daughter of a secret billionaire. The wind howled through the small coastal town of Havenport, rattling windows and sending waves crashing violently against the shore. The rain poured relentlessly, drenching everything in sight, turning the empty streets into rivers of water. Ben Walker tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his old pickup truck, his jaw clenched as he peered through the blurry windshield. "Hang on, buddy," he said, glancing at his 7-year-old son, Liam, who sat bundled up in the passenger seat. The boy was half asleep, his small body wrapped in a thick hoodie, his golden curls falling over his forehead. Ben had worked a long shift at the construction site that day, and all he wanted was to get home, dry off, and put some leftover soup on the stove. But as he made a turn onto the main road leading to their neighborhood, something caught his eye. A small figure stood on the sidewalk, barely visible in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. Ben's heart clenched. At first he thought it was just a bundle of trash tossed by the wind. But then the figure moved. A child. Alone. In the middle of a storm. "Jesus," he muttered, immediately pulling over. The rain pounded against the roof of his truck as he flung open the door and hurried toward the small figure. The child, a little girl no older than 5 or 6, stood trembling in the downpour, her tiny arms wrapped tightly around herself. She was wearing a thin, pale pink dress, now soaked through and clinging to her shivering body. Her light brown hair stuck to her cheeks, and her lips were a worrying shade of blue. "Hey there, sweetheart," Ben said, crouching down in front of her, trying to keep his voice gentle despite the urgency clawing at his chest. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The girl didn't answer. Her big, terrified green eyes stared up at him, glistening with unshed tears. She flinched slightly when a distant clap of thunder shook the ground. Ben's protective instincts kicked in hard. "Are you lost?" he asked, scanning the empty streets, hoping, praying, that a frantic parent would come running, calling for their child. But there was no one, just the storm and silence. Still no answer. His gut twisted. This wasn't right. "Okay, sweetheart, let's get you out of this rain, all right?" he said, carefully reaching out his hand. The little girl hesitated for a second before her freezing fingers grasped his calloused hand. So small, so fragile. Ben lifted her into his arms, feeling how shockingly light she was. She buried her face against his chest, her tiny body trembling uncontrollably. As he carried her back to the truck, Liam, now fully awake, leaned forward, his blue eyes widening at the sight of the soaking wet girl. "Dad, who's that?" "I don't know yet," Ben answered, placing the girl gently into the back seat. "She was alone in the storm." Liam's face creased with concern. "Is she okay?" "She will be." Ben turned up the heater, grabbed an old sweatshirt from the back seat, and wrapped it around the girl's frail body. She clutched the fabric tightly, her tiny fingers barely peeking out from the oversized sleeves. "Do you have a name, sweetheart?" Ben asked again as he pulled back onto the road. The girl hesitated, then whispered in a barely audible voice, "Charlotte." Ben's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's a pretty name," he said gently. "Charlotte, do you know where your parents are?" She shook her head, eyes staring down at the sweatshirt swallowing her small frame. Ben exchanged a look with Liam through the rearview mirror. His son's face was full of worry, mirroring the storm raging inside Ben's chest. Something was wrong. A child didn't just end up alone in a storm, with no one looking for her. Ben didn't know who Charlotte was, or how she had ended up on that sidewalk. But one thing was clear. Until he found out, he wasn't going to let her out of his sight. Ben's house was small but warm, nestled on the edge of town near the cliffs. As they stepped inside, the familiar scent of wood, coffee, and something faintly cinnamon-like greeted them. Liam immediately rushed to grab a towel, and Ben helped Charlotte out of her wet clothes, replacing them with one of Liam's old t-shirts that hung loosely over her tiny frame. "Here," Liam said, handing her a steaming cup of hot chocolate. "It's the best. My dad makes it the special way." Charlotte hesitated, then took a careful sip. A small, shy smile crept onto her lips. Ben knelt down beside her. "Charlotte, I'm going to call the sheriff and see if anyone is looking for you, okay? But until then, you're safe here. I promise." The little girl looked at him for a long moment. Then, to his complete shock, she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. A silent thank you. Ben swallowed hard, gently placing a protective hand on her back. He didn't know why, but something about this child felt different. And in that moment, as the rain continued to batter against the windows, he had a sinking feeling that his life was about to change forever. The rain had finally stopped by the time dawn broke over Havenport. The sky was still a murky gray, with the last remnants of the storm drifting out to sea, leaving behind streets slick with rain and puddles reflecting the dim morning light. Inside Ben Walker's small but cozy home, the world was quiet, except for the soft sound of a little girl's breathing. Ben stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, arms crossed over his chest, watching Charlotte sleep. She looked so small in the oversized t-shirt she was wearing, curled up on the twin bed with Liam's old blanket wrapped around her. Her tiny fingers clutched the fabric as if afraid it might disappear. Even in sleep, her delicate face held a hint of worry, as though the storm hadn't fully left her mind yet. Ben sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. He had barely gotten any sleep himself. After putting Charlotte to bed, he had called Sheriff Dawson, the town's only lawman, to report that he had found a lost child. But there had been no missing persons report, no frantic parents calling the police. It didn't sit right with Ben. How could a child be missing, alone in a storm, and no one be looking for her? Something about this wasn't adding up. Ben glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. He had work in a few hours, but there was no way he was leaving until he figured this out. Just then a small, sleepy voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Mr. Ben?" He turned to see Charlotte rubbing her eyes, sitting up in bed. Her voice was soft, uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether she was really allowed to be here. Ben forced a reassuring smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep okay?" She nodded but didn't say anything else. "You hungry?" A tiny hesitation, then another nod. Ben felt a pang in his chest. A kid her age should be chatty, full of life. Instead, she looked like she was afraid to say the wrong thing. "All right then, let's get some breakfast going," he said, offering her his hand. She stared at it for a second before slowly slipping her tiny fingers into his palm. And just like that, Ben knew. He wasn't letting this kid go until he knew she was safe. By the time Liam wandered into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, the smell of bacon and pancakes filled the house. Charlotte sat at the table, hands folded neatly in front of her, watching Ben move around the kitchen. Liam plopped down in the chair next to her, his blue eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning." Charlotte didn't respond right away, but after a second, she gave him a small, shy wave. Ben placed plates in front of them, then sat down himself. "You know," he said casually, pouring syrup over his pancakes, "my buddy Liam here can eat about 5 of these in one sitting." Liam grinned. 6, actually. Charlotte's lips twitched into the smallest hint of a smile. Ben felt something settle in his chest. Good. She needed to feel safe here. "So, Charlotte," he said, keeping his tone light, "you got a last name, sweetheart?" She hesitated, her tiny hands gripping the edge of the table. Then she shook her head. Ben exchanged a glance with Liam. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Do you remember where you live?" Again, she shook her head. "Do you remember how you got here?" Her fingers twisted in her lap. She bit her lip hard as if trying to push back something painful. Then barely above a whisper, she mumbled, "There was a car." Ben's jaw tightened. "A car? Were you inside it?" She nodded. "And then?" She shook her head again, this time more frantic. "I don't know. I don't know." Ben immediately held up his hands. "Hey, hey, it's okay. You don't have to remember everything right now." Charlotte looked down at her plate, her small shoulders hunched. Liam, who had been listening quietly, reached over and tapped her arm. "You can have my last pancake if it makes you feel better," he offered. Charlotte blinked at him. Then slowly, hesitantly, she took it. Ben exhaled softly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. After breakfast, Ben sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the first hints of sunlight break through the storm clouds. His mind was racing. If Charlotte had been in a car, that meant someone had brought her here. But who? And why had they left her alone? Ben wasn't a cop. He was just a guy trying to keep food on the table for his son. But something in his gut told him this wasn't just a simple case of a lost child. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a truck pulling up. Sheriff Dawson stepped out, his sturdy boots crunching against the damp gravel. "Morning, Ben," the older man said, tugging at the brim of his hat. "Morning, Sheriff." Dawson nodded toward the house. "That the little girl you called about?" "Yeah, Charlotte. That's all I got from her." Dawson let out a heavy sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "We checked surrounding counties. No reports of a missing kid matching her description." Ben's stomach tightened. That doesn't make sense. A kid like that doesn't just appear in the middle of a storm. Dawson's expression darkened. "I know, and that's what worries me." The two men stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Finally, Dawson sighed. "Look, I'll keep digging, but until we figure this out, you okay keeping her here?" Ben glanced through the window where Charlotte sat curled up on the couch, Liam showing her one of his books. His chest tightened. There was only one answer to that question. "Yeah," Ben said firmly. "She stays with me." Dawson nodded. "I'll be in touch." As the sheriff drove off, Ben took a deep breath. Charlotte might not remember where she came from, but until she did, she had a home here. A steady beeping sound filled the sterile hospital room. The rhythmic noise of machines hummed softly in the background, a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed Eleanor Sinclair's mind for the past few hours. She stirred, her eyelids heavy as she slowly opened her eyes. The bright fluorescent lights above made her squint, her head pounding as if someone had driven a spike through her skull. Where was she? She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through her side, making her wince. Her arms felt weak, her body sluggish. Her surroundings were unfamiliar. White walls, a stiff hospital bed, the lingering scent of antiseptic in the air. Then the memories came flooding back. The rain, the winding road, the sharp turn, the crash. Eleanor sucked in a breath, heart pounding. She had been driving, but where was she going? A movement in the corner of the room caught her attention. A man in a tailored suit stood near the window, his back to her. His silhouette was rigid, his posture straight and controlled. "You're awake." The voice was smooth, calculated. As he turned, she recognized him. Gregory Langford, her family's trusted lawyer and right-hand man. Eleanor tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She swallowed hard. "What happened?" Gregory walked toward the bed, his sharp gray eyes scanning her carefully, as if assessing whether she was fit for whatever conversation they were about to have. "You were in an accident," he said simply. "You hit a tree. A passerby found you unconscious and called for an ambulance." An accident. That much she remembered, but something felt off. "How long have I been here?" she asked. 2 days. Eleanor tried to push herself up again, ignoring the pain that shot through her ribs. You need to rest," Gregory interrupted firmly. "The doctors said you suffered a mild concussion and temporary memory loss due to the impact." Memory loss. Eleanor froze. That explained the nagging sensation at the back of her mind, the feeling that something was missing, something important. She gritted her teeth. "I don't have time to rest, Gregory. I was going somewhere. I was... She trailed off, trying to piece together the fractured images in her mind. Gregory's face remained unreadable. It doesn't matter now. You're safe. That's what's important. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. Something in his tone felt too controlled, too rehearsed. She forced herself to think harder. She had been driving, yes, away from the city, away from something. But what? The frustration built in her chest. Why couldn't she remember? She pressed a hand to her forehead, inhaling sharply. Gregory, what was I doing before the accident? He hesitated for just a fraction of a second. You were heading to a private retreat. A retreat? That didn't feel right. And then, a flash, a voice, a small giggle, tiny arms wrapped around her neck, a child's laughter. Eleanor's breath caught. Her pulse quickened, her body stiffening as something clicked in her mind. She turned to Gregory, her eyes wide. Where is Charlotte? A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed Gregory's face, but it was gone before Eleanor could read it. Charlotte? He asked carefully, as if testing the waters. My daughter, Eleanor pressed. Where is she? Was she with me in the car? Gregory's expression was composed, but there was a tightness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. Charlotte is safe, he said. Eleanor's breath released in a slow exhale. Relief flooded her, until the next question formed in her mind. Where? Gregory glanced at the door, as if ensuring they were alone. Then, in a calm, even tone, he said, With her nanny, of course. She was never in the car with you. Eleanor's brows knitted together. Something felt wrong about that answer. Charlotte had a nanny, yes, but she had been with Eleanor before the accident. She was sure of it. Gregory must have seen the doubt flicker across her face because he quickly added, Your accident was stressful enough. Don't worry yourself over unnecessary concerns. Charlotte is fine. Unnecessary concerns. The words rubbed her the wrong way. Eleanor may have lost fragments of her memory, but she wasn't stupid. She searched his face, trying to find any cracks in his carefully constructed expression. Take me to her, she demanded. Gregory's lips pressed into a thin line. I don't think that's a good idea right now. You need rest, Eleanor. And Charlotte is... Take me to my daughter, she snapped, her voice laced with authority. For the first time, Gregory hesitated, and that was all the confirmation Eleanor needed. Something was very, very wrong. Gregory sighed, then glanced at his watch. Eleanor, I'll have the driver bring you home tomorrow. You need to recover. But Eleanor was already swinging her legs off the bed, ignoring the burning ache in her ribs. She didn't care about the pain. She needed to see Charlotte. Something inside her was screaming that she had to go. Now Gregory took a step closer, his voice lowering. Eleanor, listen to me. Charlotte is safe. There's nothing to worry about. Her stomach twisted. Gregory never repeated himself unless he was trying to get ahead of something. They were hiding something from her. And suddenly she remembered something else. She had been running away. From what, she still couldn't piece together. But the one thing she knew, with absolute certainty, was that she had been taking Charlotte with her. And now Charlotte was missing. She looked up at Gregory. Where is she? She demanded, her voice sharp as steel. Gregory sighed, shaking his head. Eleanor. She grabbed his wrist, her nails digging into his skin. Where is my daughter? For a fraction of a second, the perfect mask he always wore cracked. And Eleanor Sinclair, one of the most powerful women in the country, felt her blood turn to ice. Charlotte wasn't with her nanny. She wasn't home. She was gone. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt truly helpless. The walls of the hospital seemed to close in on Eleanor Sinclair. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the soft murmur of nurses outside. Everything felt distant, drowned out by the one singular truth pounding in her skull. Charlotte was missing. Gregory Langford stood across from her, his expression unreadable, but Eleanor could see it now. The hesitation, the evasion, the carefully measured words meant to pacify her. They had been lying to her. She forced herself to take a slow, measured breath, trying to ignore the panic rising in her chest. Losing control wouldn't help her find her daughter. Gregory, she said, her voice deceptively calm, tell me exactly where Charlotte is. He let out a slow sigh, adjusting the cuff of his tailored suit. Eleanor, you need to rest. Do not patronize me. Her tone was ice, sharp and unwavering. I want to hear the truth. Right now. Gregory met her gaze, and for the first time in years, she saw something that resembled uncertainty. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. Charlotte was supposed to be with you. The words hit like a gut punch. Eleanor's breath hitched. What do you mean, supposed to be? Gregory exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You left the estate 2 nights ago. You took Charlotte with you. Then you crashed. By the time the authorities found you, you were alone. Alone. The world spun slightly. Eleanor gripped the sheets of her hospital bed, her knuckles white. No, she whispered. That's not possible. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to reach back into the fragmented pieces of her memory. The rain, the road, Charlotte's laughter from the back seat. Then a bright flash, the sickening screech of metal, a muffled cry. Eleanor's eyes snapped open. Charlotte had been with her. That much was certain. So where the hell was she now? Eleanor swung her legs off the bed, ignoring the pain that shot through her ribs. She had wasted enough time. Gregory's eyes narrowed. Where do you think you're going? To find my daughter. You're not well enough to... Watch me. Her body screamed in protest, but sheer determination kept her upright. She moved toward the chair where her clothes had been placed. Gregory stepped forward. Eleanor, be reasonable. She turned on him, fury burning in her chest. You lied to me, she accused. You let me believe she was safe when you knew she wasn't. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? She let out a hollow laugh. Do you have any idea what you've done? Charlotte could be anywhere right now. Gregory's jaw tightened. We have people looking... Not fast enough, Eleanor snapped. Her hands trembled as she buttoned her blouse, her mind racing. She needed to retrace her steps, to figure out where she had been going that night. And more importantly, who else might have known. Eleanor grabbed her coat, turned back to Gregory, and delivered a cold, hard warning. If anything happens to my daughter, she said, voice deadly quiet, you will regret every single lie you told me. Gregory didn't argue, because for the first time since she had woken up, he knew she was serious. 15 minutes later, Eleanor sat in the backseat of her town car, gripping the leather upholstery so hard her fingers ached. The city streets blurred past the window, headlights streaking through the darkness like ghosts. Her mind raced through the puzzle pieces. She had taken Charlotte. She had been driving away. But from what? Gregory had claimed she was heading to a retreat, but she knew better. She had been running. But from who? Eleanor closed her eyes, forcing herself to dive deeper into the fog of her mind. A voice surfaced, low, controlling. Eleanor, be smart about this. Her eyes snapped open. Her father, Howard Sinclair, the man who had built an empire and had never let her forget that she belonged to it. The memory hit her like a tidal wave. Howard had been furious about her decisions, furious that she had been raising Charlotte on her own, furious that she had started talking about stepping away from the company, and he had threatened her, not with words but with the unmistakable look in his eyes. And suddenly Eleanor knew. This wasn't just an accident. Someone had taken Charlotte. 100 miles away in the small town of Havenport, Ben Walker sat on his porch, staring at the little girl sleeping on his couch. The night had been long. Charlotte had finally dozed off, curled beneath one of Liam's old blankets, her small face soft and peaceful in the dim light. Ben ran a hand through his hair. The feeling in his gut hadn't gone away. Sheriff Dawson had called back earlier. Still no reports of a missing child, which meant one of two things. Either Charlotte had no one looking for her, or someone was hiding the fact that she was gone. Ben wasn't sure which was worse. He glanced at Liam, who had fallen asleep in an armchair, determined to stand guard for Charlotte. A small smile tugged at Ben's lips. His son had a good heart. But as he looked back at Charlotte, a new thought settled heavily in his mind. Who are you, kid? And what kind of danger was following you here? The night in Havenport was quiet, except for the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the cliffs in the distance. The storm had passed, but the unease in Ben Walker's chest remained, settling deep into his bones like a warning he couldn't shake. He stood in the dim glow of his porch light, his arms crossed, watching over the little girl who had unknowingly upended his life. Charlotte. He didn't know much about her, just that she had been found alone in the storm, scared and silent. She barely spoke, yet her green eyes carried the weight of something far beyond her years. And that nagging voice in Ben's head kept whispering, "This isn't just a lost child." Inside, Charlotte lay curled up on the couch, her tiny hands gripping the fabric of Liam's old blanket. Ben sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Sheriff Dawson had promised to check surrounding counties again, but Ben already knew what he was going to hear. No missing person reports. A child like Charlotte doesn't just disappear without someone looking for her, unless someone didn't want her to be found. The thought sent a slow chill down his spine. Then, just as Ben was about to go back inside, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. His shoulders tensed. It was nearly midnight. No one should be coming out this way. The car rolled to a slow stop across the street, its black paint barely visible against the night. Ben narrowed his eyes, stepping off the porch. No one got lost in Havenport. This wasn't the kind of town where people just pass through. The driver's side door opened. A man in a sharp black suit stepped out, his movements precise, controlled. Ben's instincts flared. The man didn't belong here. He scanned Ben's house, his gaze lingering on the window where Charlotte was sleeping. Ben took a step forward, his voice firm. "You lost?" The man's lips curled into a polite, too polite, smile. "Not at all. I'm looking for someone." Ben's jaw tightened. "Yeah? And who would that be?" The man tilted his head slightly as if assessing him. "A little girl," he said. 5 years old, brown hair, green eyes." Ben felt his entire body go rigid. His pulse kicked up, but he kept his face unreadable. "Can't say I've seen anyone like that." The man's smile didn't falter. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure." Silence stretched between them. Then the man's tone shifted just slightly. "See, the thing is," he continued, "she's a very important child. Her mother is worried sick about her. You'd be doing a good thing by helping us find her." Ben didn't move. Everything about this felt wrong. Something about the man's demeanor, too smooth, too practiced, made Ben's gut scream that he wasn't here to help anyone. Ben crossed his arms. "So call the cops. File a report. That's how this kind of thing works, right?" A flicker of annoyance flashed in the man's expression before it was gone. "We don't want to waste law enforcement's time," he said smoothly. "We just need to know if she's been seen in the area." Ben kept his stance firm. "And if she was?" The man's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Then we'd take her home where she belongs." Miles away, Eleanor Sinclair gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had escaped the hospital. Gregory had tried to keep her there, tried to pacify her, tried to control her the way her father always had. But no one was keeping her locked away while her daughter was missing. The moment she had left, she had gone straight to her personal security archives, something she never thought she'd have to use. And there, in the last recorded security footage from her estate, she saw it. Her father's men. They had been waiting. Charlotte had been taken before Eleanor even crashed. Her heart pounded against her ribs, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She had been right. They took her, and now they were looking for her. But not to bring her home, to erase her. She had one lead, one last ping on her car's GPS before the crash wiped everything out. Havenport. Eleanor gritted her teeth, pressing the gas pedal harder. "Hold on, Charlotte. I'm coming." Back in Havenport, the tension between Ben and the man in the suit thickened like fog. Ben's muscles coiled, every instinct in him screaming that this man wasn't here for any good reason. "You got a name?" Ben asked. The man's smile sharpened. "That's not important." Ben took another slow step forward. "See, it is to me, because people don't just roll into town in the middle of the night looking for lost kids without a damn good reason." The man's expression cooled. For the first time, his eyes lost their fake warmth. And Ben knew. This wasn't a concerned family friend. This was someone who didn't care what happened to Charlotte, so long as she disappeared. Slowly, deliberately, Ben positioned himself directly in front of the porch, blocking the man's line of sight to the house. The man watched him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind his gaze. Then he exhaled through his nose as if this wasn't worth the trouble. "Well," he said smoothly, "if you do happen to see her, give us a call." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card and placed it on the hood of Ben's truck. Then without another word, he turned, got into his car, and drove off. Ben waited until the taillights disappeared before he let out the breath he had been holding. Then slowly he reached for the card. It was blank, except for a single phone number. No name, no company, just a number. Ben's jaw clenched. This wasn't over. Whoever these people were, they weren't done looking. And if they came back, Ben Walker wasn't letting them take Charlotte. Not now, not ever. The town of Havenport woke up to a crisp, quiet morning. The storm had long passed, leaving behind streets washed clean by the rain, the scent of damp earth still lingering in the air. But inside Ben Walker's small house, peace was nowhere to be found. Ben had barely slept. He sat at the kitchen table, a fresh cup of coffee going cold in front of him, staring at the mysterious card left by the man in the suit. A single phone number, no name, no company. Nothing about it felt right. Liam sat across from him, absently pushing cereal around his bowl. He was watching Charlotte, who was quietly coloring in one of his old notebooks, her little fingers clutching the crayon like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She was trying to act normal, but Ben saw the way her shoulders tensed at every small noise, the way her eyes flickered toward the door as if expecting someone to come through it. She was scared, and Ben didn't blame her. Someone had come looking for her, someone dangerous. He had promised himself last night that he wouldn't let them take her. But how long could he keep that promise before the danger escalated? His gut told him one thing: this wasn't over. And he was right. Because somewhere on the outskirts of Havenport, Eleanor Sinclair was speeding toward him. And when she arrived, nothing would ever be the same. Eleanor's heart pounded as she gripped the steering wheel, her foot pressing hard on the gas pedal. She had been driving for hours following the only clue she had: Havenport. Her father had people looking for Charlotte. She had no doubt that they had already gotten here first. She had to be faster. She had to get to Charlotte before they did, before it was too late. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Gregory. She clenched her jaw but answered. "Eleanor." His voice was clipped, controlled, annoyed. "Where are you?" "You already know the answer to that," she snapped. "You left the hospital against medical advice," he continued as if she were a child. "This isn't safe." "You want to talk to me about safety?" Her voice was sharp, edged with rage. "My daughter is missing, Gregory, and you lied to me." Silence, then a calculated response. "Eleanor, let me handle this." "No!" Her knuckles turned white against the wheel. "You've been handling things for years, and look where it got me." She hung up before he could say another word. No more lies, no more waiting. She was getting her daughter back, no matter what it took. Ben had just stood up from the kitchen table when he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. His instincts sharpened. Another visitor this early in the morning? That couldn't be good. His eyes flicked to Charlotte. Her tiny hands froze mid-coloring. Ben stepped forward, placing himself between her and the door. "Stay here," he said, voice low but firm. Liam's eyes were wide, but he nodded. Ben grabbed the baseball bat that he kept near the door. Not that he was expecting to use it, but after last night's visit, he wasn't taking chances. Then he opened the door and froze. Standing on his porch was a woman who looked wild and exhausted, but unmistakably powerful. Her clothes were wrinkled, like she had been driving all night. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her expensive coat soaked from the morning mist. But what struck him most was her eyes. Sharp, desperate, a storm raging within them. "Where is she?" Her voice was steady, but Ben could hear the barely contained panic underneath. He didn't move. "Who are you?" Her breath hitched. "I'm her mother." Ben's grip on the doorframe tightened. He had expected this moment to come eventually, but he hadn't expected her. This woman didn't look like someone who had lost a child because of neglect or irresponsibility. She looked like someone who had fought a war to get here. Ben exhaled, glancing back toward the living room where Charlotte sat frozen in place. Then before he could say a word, Charlotte saw her, and everything changed. Eleanor barely registered the man in front of her. Her entire world narrowed the second she saw the small figure behind him. Charlotte. She stood there, her green eyes wide, uncertain. Eleanor's throat tightened. "Charlotte, sweetheart," she whispered. But Charlotte didn't run to her. She didn't move at all. She just stood there, clutching the crayon in her tiny hand, her expression unreadable. Eleanor felt her heart shatter. She had pictured this moment over and over, her daughter running into her arms, sobbing with relief. But this was different. This was hesitation. This was fear. She swallowed hard, forcing back the tears threatening to spill. "Charlotte," she tried again, softer this time. "It's me, baby. It's Mommy." Charlotte looked up at Ben, and Eleanor's chest tightened like a vice. The child trusted him. Ben saw it too, and for the first time he understood. This was no ordinary missing child case. Charlotte wasn't just lost. She was afraid to go back. And now Ben had a decision to make. Did he hand her over to this woman, the mother she barely recognized? Or did he listen to the instinct deep in his gut telling him, this wasn't over yet? For the first time in her life, Eleanor Sinclair felt completely powerless. She had spent years building an empire, controlling boardrooms filled with the most ruthless businessmen, standing her ground against some of the wealthiest, most influential people in the country. And yet one glance from her own daughter had shattered her. Charlotte stood there, frozen in the living room of a small house that wasn't hers, her tiny fingers gripping the hem of the oversized sweatshirt she was wearing, one that wasn't hers either. She wasn't running into Eleanor's arms. She wasn't crying out for her mother. She was waiting. For him. Eleanor's sharp gaze flickered to the man standing protectively in front of Charlotte, the man she had barely registered until now. Ben Walker, the way Charlotte had looked at him. The trust in her little green eyes made Eleanor's stomach twist. How long had she been here? How much had she bonded with this man? Eleanor forced herself to steady her breathing. Panic wouldn't help her now. She took a slow step forward, her heart aching. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice softer this time, more pleading than she had ever intended. "It's me. Mommy's here." Charlotte's small fingers tightened around the fabric of her borrowed sweatshirt. Ben shifted slightly, blocking Eleanor's direct path to her daughter. The movement was subtle, but Eleanor caught it instantly. Her sharp blue eyes snapped to his. "Step aside." Ben didn't move. "I don't know you," Eleanor bristled. "I'm her mother." Ben's expression remained unreadable. "And yet, she's looking at me like she's waiting for permission to go with you." Eleanor's jaw clenched. Her daughter, waiting for permission, from a man she had never met. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Charlotte should have been relieved, overjoyed, clinging to her like she was her entire world. Instead, she was scared, unsure. Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat, trying to keep the growing panic from seeping into her voice. "Charlotte, baby," she tried again, softer now, as if speaking too loudly might startle her daughter away. "I came to get you. I was in an accident. But I'm okay now. I promise. You're safe now." Charlotte didn't answer. Her little feet shifted slightly backward. Ben noticed it. Eleanor noticed it. And the realization hit her like a slap to the face. Charlotte was more afraid of going with her than staying with this man. A cold chill ran down Eleanor's spine. Her father's people had gotten to her first. They had done something to make her afraid. Eleanor turned her attention back to Ben, her voice low but laced with steel. "You don't know me," she said, "but I promise you I am the only person in this world who truly has Charlotte's best interest at heart." Ben's expression didn't change. "Funny," he said, his tone even, "because I watched that kid wake up screaming from nightmares last night, and she hasn't said a single word about wanting to go home." Eleanor's heart stopped. Charlotte had nightmares? The thought made her stomach twist painfully. Her hands clenched into fists. She was losing this battle, and she never lost battles. Ben exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, lady, I'm not saying you're a bad mother, but something about the situation isn't right. Someone came looking for her last night. Someone who didn't give me their name. Just a number. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Who? She demanded. Ben's gaze sharpened. Now you're interested. Eleanor's nostrils flared, but she forced herself to stay calm. I don't know who you are, but you need to understand something. My father is a very powerful man, and he doesn't take well to losing control. Charlotte is more valuable to him than you can possibly imagine. Ben folded his arms. Yeah? And why's that? Eleanor hesitated. She had already said too much. She had spent years keeping Charlotte out of her father's reach. She had fought against his controlling grip on her life, his insistence that she was nothing more than an extension of his legacy. And when she had threatened to take Charlotte away for good, this had happened. Her father had made his move. Ben watched her carefully, waiting for an answer. Eleanor exhaled. She needed his help. Like it or not, this man had kept her daughter safe when she couldn't. Because if my father gets her back, I may never see her again, she admitted, her voice shaking for the first time. Ben's expression shifted just slightly. Not disbelief, not doubt, but something closer to understanding. Eleanor clenched her jaw. She hated this, hated feeling vulnerable. But if Charlotte trusted this man, then maybe, for now, she had to as well. She took a slow, measured breath. I know you don't trust me, and I don't blame you, but I need to see my daughter. Just for a few minutes. Please. Ben hesitated. For the first time since this conversation had started, there was no hostility in her voice. Just raw, desperate emotion. Charlotte peered up at Ben, her small hands twisting in the fabric of her sweatshirt. Then for the first time since Eleanor had walked through the door, she spoke. Is she really my mommy? The quiet, hesitant question nearly broke Eleanor in half. Ben sighed heavily. Then finally, he stepped aside. Eleanor immediately dropped to her knees, opening her arms. Charlotte took one small step forward, then another, and when she finally ran into Eleanor's embrace, sobbing against her chest, Eleanor felt like she could breathe for the first time, but it wasn't over. Because even as she held Charlotte tight, she knew. They weren't safe yet. Her father's people were still out there, and the real fight was only beginning. Eleanor held Charlotte tight against her chest, pressing a kiss into her daughter's damp hair. She had spent 2 days not knowing where Charlotte was, 2 days picturing the worst. Now, with her small body trembling in Eleanor's arms, she swore she would never let her go again. But as much as Eleanor wanted to savor the relief, she knew the moment was fleeting, because this wasn't over. She could feel Ben Walker's watchful gaze on her, standing just a few feet away, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He didn't trust her yet, and she couldn't blame him. Eleanor slowly pulled back, cupping Charlotte's small face in her hands. Baby, she whispered, did someone hurt you? Did they say anything mean to you? Charlotte shook her head. No. Eleanor exhaled, her heart aching at how fragile her voice sounded. Ben's voice broke the moment. So what's the plan? Eleanor straightened, her sharp blue eyes locking onto his. The plan, she said, regaining her composure, is to get out of here before my father's people come back. Ben didn't blink. So you admit they're dangerous? She hesitated, then nodded. Ben's jaw clenched. I knew it. Eleanor braced herself. I need to take her somewhere safe. Ben let out a humorless chuckle. And where exactly is safe? Because from where I'm standing, looks like the second she leaves here, she's right back in their hands. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Because he was right. Her father had resources, money, power, people watching every move she made. There was no hiding if she went back to her world. But staying here wasn't an option either. She turned to Charlotte, running a hand through her daughter's soft curls. Baby, we have to go. I need you to trust me, okay? Charlotte bit her lip, her little hand tightening around Eleanor's fingers. Then, she looked up at Ben. Eleanor's breath caught. Charlotte had trusted this man to keep her safe. And in some ways, she trusted him more than her own mother. The realization burned like acid. Ben let out a slow sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I don't know much about your world, but I do know one thing. Eleanor lifted a brow. And what's that? Ben met her gaze, his voice steady. If we're running, we don't do it alone. Just outside of Havenport, in the dim glow of a sleek black car, Gregory Langford sat in the passenger seat, staring at the darkened house through binoculars. They're still inside, he muttered. The man sitting next to him, a stone-faced operative named Carson, tapped a cigarette against the dashboard. You sure the kid's there? Gregory clenched his jaw. I'm sure, Carson smirked. Then let's go get her. Gregory's stomach twisted. He had worked for the Sinclair family for years, but even he had never seen Howard Sinclair this desperate before. He didn't just want Charlotte back. He wanted Eleanor back under his control. Gregory knew the orders. Bring the child home by any means necessary. But something about this felt wrong. For years, he had justified working for Howard Sinclair. It had been about business, about loyalty. But this was stealing a little girl from her mother, and that didn't sit right with him. Carson flicked the cigarette out the window, cracking his knuckles. We going in or what? Gregory hesitated, then finally he spoke. Not yet. We wait. Carson raised a brow. For what? Gregory's jaw tightened. For them to make a mistake. Back inside the house, Ben leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Eleanor pace. All right, he said. So what's the move? Eleanor ran a hand through her hair. I have a place. Ben's brows furrowed. A safe house, she clarified. One that my father doesn't know about. Ben's expression remained skeptical. And how far is this place? A few hours, Ben exhaled sharply. So you expect me to just let you take her and disappear? Eleanor straightened, meeting his gaze. She's my daughter. Ben's jaw clenched. Yeah? And where were you when she was alone in a storm? The words landed like a slap. Eleanor's breath hitched. Ben saw the flash of pain in her eyes, but he didn't back down. I don't know you, he continued, and right now, neither does she. Eleanor swallowed hard. She hated this. Hated that this man, a stranger, had earned her daughter's trust in a way she hadn't. But he was right. If she wanted Charlotte to trust her again, she couldn't just take her and run. She had to prove that she was safe. She took a deep breath. Come with us. Ben's brows lifted. Excuse me? You don't trust me, she said, and I don't trust you. But Charlotte does. Ben hesitated. Eleanor pressed on. You want to keep her safe? Fine, then come with us. Help me protect her. Ben stared at her for a long moment. Then finally he exhaled. You're crazy, Eleanor smirked. So, I've been told. Ben looked at Charlotte, her big green eyes filled with uncertainty, but also hope, and he knew he couldn't let her go alone. With a heavy sigh, he ran a hand over his face. All right, Sinclair, he muttered. Let's run. Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, because for the first time, she wasn't doing this alone. The night air was thick with tension as Eleanor, Ben, and Charlotte hurried to Ben's old pickup truck. The plan had been decided. They were leaving Havenport together. Ben still wasn't sure what the hell he had gotten himself into. One day, he was a struggling single dad, fixing engines and raising his kid. The next, he was on the run with a billionaire heiress and a little girl being hunted by powerful men in suits. Not exactly a typical Tuesday. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Charlotte curled up in the back seat, her tiny hands gripping Liam's old stuffed bear like a lifeline, he knew one thing. He wasn't letting her go. Eleanor climbed into the passenger seat, her sharp blue eyes scanning the road ahead. Ben gripped the wheel tightly. Then with one last look at his house, the only home he had ever known, he threw the truck into gear and drove into the night. The road stretched ahead, dark and quiet, the only sound the steady hum of the engine. Charlotte had finally fallen asleep, her small body rising and falling with each breath. Ben glanced at Eleanor. This safe house of yours, how do we know they won't find it? Eleanor exhaled, her fingers tapping restlessly against the dashboard. Because it's not mine. Ben shot her a look. Then whose is it? My mother's, Eleanor admitted. Ben frowned. I thought your family was the problem. They are. Eleanor shifted in her seat, staring out at the passing trees. My father controlled everything in my life, my career, my relationships, even my decisions as a mother. Ben listened in silence. But my mother? Eleanor let out a small, bitter laugh. She was the only person he couldn't control. When she left him, she disappeared off the map. No security, no staff, just peace. A life without power and influence. Ben raised an eyebrow. And you think she's just going to let you bring all this danger to her doorstep? Eleanor glanced at Charlotte. She will for her granddaughter. Ben exhaled. All right. How far? About 3 hours. Ben nodded. Then let's hope we get there before they do. A few miles back, a sleek black car followed the same highway, its headlights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. Gregory Langford sat in the passenger seat, his hands clasped together, his expression unreadable. They're running, Carson muttered, keeping one hand on the wheel. Took them long enough to figure out they were being hunted. Gregory didn't answer, because something about this wasn't sitting right with him. Eleanor was smart. If she was running, it meant she had a plan. And Gregory needed to know where she was going before Howard Sinclair gave the order to do something irreversible. His phone buzzed, a single message. Howard Sinclair. End this before it gets worse. Gregory's stomach tightened, because he knew exactly what that meant. Carson smirked. Guess Daddy's getting impatient. Gregory's jaw clenched. Howard wasn't just sending men anymore. This was going to turn into a hunt. And if Gregory didn't get to Eleanor first, someone far worse would. Ben's truck rattled down the highway, the empty road stretching ahead. He glanced at the fuel gauge, half a tank left, but something in his gut felt wrong. He flicked his eyes to the rearview mirror. For the past 20 miles, a pair of headlights had been following them. Not too close, not too obvious, but consistent. Ben's grip tightened on the wheel. Eleanor noticed his tension. What is it? Car behind us, he murmured. Been there a while. Eleanor's body went rigid. Ben didn't slow down, didn't turn his head, but he could feel her pulse quicken. You think it's them? Eleanor took a slow breath. I don't know, but I don't believe in coincidences. Ben's jaw clenched. He had spent years trusting his instincts, and right now, his instincts were screaming. We need to lose them, Eleanor said quietly. Ben nodded. Hold on. Ben took the next exit without signaling, his tires screeching slightly against the pavement. Eleanor twisted in her seat, watching the car behind them. It didn't hesitate. It followed. Ben cursed under his breath. Charlotte stirred in the back seat but didn't wake up. Eleanor turned back to Ben. Faster! Ben pushed the gas pedal, weaving through the empty streets of a small town. The black car matched their speed. Damn it, Ben muttered. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. Eleanor's fingers dug into the seat. Take the next left. Ben didn't ask questions. He turned hard. The truck jolted forward, tires screeching as they raced down a side street. The car followed, but just as it rounded the corner, Eleanor saw something in the distance. A construction site. Go straight through, she ordered. Ben's eyes flicked to her. Are you crazy? Do it! Ben cursed but slammed the gas. The truck barreled through the unfinished road, bouncing over loose gravel, kicking up dust. The car behind them hesitated for a fraction of a second, but that was all they needed. The black sedan hit a deep pothole, and the entire vehicle lurched sideways. Ben didn't look back. He just drove. For the next 30 minutes, they didn't speak. Eleanor sat completely still, her breathing uneven. Ben kept his eyes on the road, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. Charlotte stirred, rubbing her eyes. Are we there yet? She mumbled sleepily. Ben exhaled. Not yet, kiddo. Charlotte sighed, then curled up against the door. Within seconds, she was asleep again. Ben finally spoke. They're not going to stop, are they? Eleanor shook her head. No. Ben clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a getaway anymore. This was a war. And if they wanted to win, they needed more than a plan. They needed to be smarter than the people chasing them. Eleanor turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to disappear. Ben nodded slowly, because as much as he hated to admit it, she was right. The dirt road leading to Eleanor's mother's cabin was narrow and winding, cutting through thick woods that seemed to stretch on forever. Ben kept a firm grip on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the trees on either side. Every shadow felt like a threat. Eleanor sat beside him, her body tense. She had called ahead, but her mother hadn't picked up. That wasn't unusual. Her mother had spent years avoiding the world. But something about the silence gnawed at her. In the back seat, Charlotte was curled up, asleep, her small fingers still gripping Liam's old stuffed bear. Ben exhaled. This place of yours, it's really off the grid? Eleanor nodded. My mother made sure of it. No cell service, no landlines. She never even uses credit cards. Ben raised an eyebrow. Sounds paranoid. Eleanor's lips pressed together, or just prepared. The truck rumbled over a hill and finally, through the thinning trees, the cabin came into view. It was a modest structure, nestled deep in the woods. The paint was slightly weathered, but the place looked solid, untouched by the world. Ben slowed the truck, his eyes narrowing. Something felt off. The front door was ajar. Eleanor saw it at the same time. Her pulse spiked. Mom, she breathed, already reaching for the door handle. Ben grabbed her wrist before she could jump out. Wait! Eleanor shot him a glare. That's my mother. And we don't know who else is inside, Ben said, voice steady. Eleanor hesitated. She hated to admit it, but he was right. Ben cut the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. They climbed out of the truck, moving carefully toward the cabin. The front steps creaked under their weight. Ben pushed the door open. The house was empty, but it had been searched. Furniture had been shifted, cushions slashed, drawers left open. Whoever had been here was looking for something. Eleanor's chest tightened. Mom, she called, stepping inside. Silence. Ben scanned the room. Think she ran? Eleanor swallowed hard. Or she was taken. She refused to believe her mother would just leave without a fight. Ben moved toward the kitchen, his sharp eyes scanning the countertops. A steaming cup of half-drunk tea sat abandoned, still faintly warm. She was here not long ago, he murmured. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Mom? Her voice cracked. Then from the hallway, a creak. Ben's hand flew to his waistband, where he had tucked a small handgun hours earlier. Eleanor's breath caught. Then a figure emerged. Her mother. Marion Sinclair had aged well. Her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a loose braid. Her sharp eyes flicked between Eleanor and Ben, wary but unsurprised. You shouldn't have come, she said flatly. Eleanor's breath shuddered out in relief, but anger followed quickly. Mom, what the hell happened here? Marion's gaze moved past her daughter to Charlotte, who had just woken up in the truck, rubbing her sleepy eyes. When she saw Charlotte, something shifted in her face. A quiet understanding, a deep maternal sadness. Then she looked at Eleanor again. They found me, Marion said. Your father's men. They came an hour ago, looking for you. Eleanor's heart dropped. Ben tensed. How did they know we were coming? Marion exhaled. You were followed. Ben cursed under his breath. Eleanor shook her head. No, we lost them. Marion's gaze softened, but it held no reassurance. No, sweetheart, she said gently. You didn't. A cold, sick feeling settled in Eleanor's stomach. Then, the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Ben's head snapped toward the window. Headlights moving fast. Marion's face hardened. You have to go. Now. Ben moved first. He grabbed Charlotte from the truck, holding her close as he turned to Eleanor. Back door. Now. Eleanor's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. Mom, dash! Marion cupped Eleanor's face, her eyes fierce. You have to get her out of here. Eleanor's throat tightened. Come with us. Marion shook her head. They'll follow me. If I stay, I can buy you time. Eleanor felt her heart rip in two, but there was no time to argue. Marion grabbed a set of keys from the counter and shoved them into Eleanor's hands. There's an old Jeep out back. Take the mountain road. They won't expect it. Ben's jaw tightened. Will you be okay? Marion's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Don't worry about me, son. I know how to disappear. Then, a knock at the front door. Slow, measured. The kind that sent a deep primal fear through Eleanor's veins. Marion's eyes darkened. Go! Ben grabbed Eleanor's hand and pulled her toward the back door. Charlotte clung to his shirt, her tiny hands trembling. They slipped out just as the front door burst open. Gunfire erupted behind them. The back of the property opened into a dense forest. The old Jeep was exactly where Marion had said, covered in a layer of dust and leaves. Ben yanked open the driver's side door. Get in! Eleanor hesitated, tears burning in her eyes. Her mother was inside that house, alone. Then she heard another gunshot. Ben grabbed her arm. Eleanor, we have to move. With one last aching glance at the cabin, Eleanor climbed into the Jeep. Ben shoved the key into the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Then, headlights appeared behind them. Black SUVs, fast, armed. Ben didn't wait. He slammed the gas, kicking up dirt and leaves as they shot forward into the trees. Branches scraped against the sides of the Jeep, the road barely visible in the darkness. Eleanor twisted in her seat, heart pounding. They're gaining on us. Ben clenched his jaw. Not for long. Ahead, the mountain road split. Ben took the smaller path, the one barely wide enough for a single vehicle. The SUVs behind them hesitated. For the first time that night, Ben allowed himself a small, sharp smile. They were getting away. But it wasn't over, not even close, because Eleanor's father wasn't just chasing them anymore. He was hunting them, and he wouldn't stop until he had Charlotte back, no matter what it cost. The roar of the Jeep's engine echoed through the dense mountain pass, kicking up dust and gravel as Ben pushed the vehicle to its limits. The headlights of the black SUVs still glowed ominously in the distance, their pursuers relentless. Eleanor clutched Charlotte tightly in the back seat, whispering soothing words even as her own heart pounded. Ben's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. Hold on! Ahead, the narrow dirt road split into two, one leading to a paved highway, the other disappearing into the thick wilderness. Ben made a split-second decision and yanked the wheel sharply to the right. The Jeep veered off the main path and plunged into the trees, branches whipping against the windshield. The ride was rough, the tires skidding against the uneven ground. But Ben knew this was their best shot. The SUVs behind them hesitated. The drivers hadn't expected them to take this path. A road barely wide enough for a single vehicle. Ben's plan had worked. For the first time, they had the advantage. Eleanor clung to Charlotte, pressing a kiss against her daughter's hair. Almost there, baby, she murmured. Just a little longer. Charlotte buried her face against her mother's chest, her tiny fingers gripping Eleanor's jacket. Ben's focus remained on the road ahead. If they could just make it another few miles. Crack! A gunshot rang out. A bullet tore through the Jeep's side mirror, sending shards of glass flying. Ben swore under his breath, gripping the wheel tighter. They're still trying! Eleanor turned, fury blazing in her eyes. She had spent years being controlled by her father, manipulated, used like a pawn. But now she was done running. Her jaw tightened as she grabbed Ben's arm. Turn here. Ben didn't hesitate. He veered onto a hidden trail, nearly invisible under the thick canopy of trees. The SUVs barreled past them, missing the turn entirely. They were gone. Ben let out a sharp breath, his heart still pounding. That was close. Eleanor finally exhaled, her arms still wrapped protectively around Charlotte. Too close. They had escaped, but it wasn't over, not yet. By dawn, they reached a secluded clearing overlooking a valley. The mountains stretched far in the distance, the first rays of sunlight painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Ben turned off the engine. Silence settled around them. They had made it, but Eleanor knew they weren't safe until she ended this. She pulled out her phone, a burner she had kept hidden. Ben watched her carefully. What are you doing? Eleanor's fingers hovered over the keypad. Calling my father, she said. Ben tensed. You sure that's a good idea? Eleanor's eyes darkened. It's the only way to stop this. She hit dial. Howard Sinclair answered on the first ring. Eleanor, his voice was smooth, calculated. It's about time. Eleanor gritted her teeth. Call them off, Dad. It's over. Howard chuckled. You know it doesn't work that way. Yes, it does, she snapped. Because if anything happens to me or Charlotte, the information I've gathered goes public. Every account, every deal, every dirty secret you've tried to bury. Silence. For the first time, Howard hesitated. You wouldn't, he finally said. Eleanor's voice was like steel. Try me? A long pause. Then, fine, he said, his voice tight. But don't think this means you've won. Eleanor smiled coldly. Oh, but I have. She ended the call and exhaled deeply. It was over. She had finally won. Ben watched her carefully. What now? Eleanor turned to him, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Now, she said softly, looking down at Charlotte, we start over. The small coastal town of Havenport had never been quieter. The waves crashed gently against the shore, the scent of salt and sun filling the air. Ben stood outside his newly renovated auto repair shop, wiping his hands on a rag. Looking good, a familiar voice called. He turned. Eleanor stood there, Charlotte holding her hand, both of them smiling. Ben grinned. Not bad for a guy who used to just patch up old trucks. Eleanor chuckled. You're still patching up old trucks. Ben smirked. Yeah, but now I get paid better for it. Charlotte rushed forward, wrapping her small arms around Ben's waist. Guess what? She said excitedly. Ben crouched to her level. What? I start school next week. Ben's grin widened. That's amazing, kiddo. Eleanor's gaze softened. She loves it here. Ben met her eyes, something unspoken passing between them. They had been through hell together, but now they had a chance to be something more. Ben exhaled. You sticking around for good, Sinclair? Eleanor tilted her head, a slow smile spreading across her lips. Call me Eleanor, she said, and with that everything changed. The past no longer held them prisoner. The future was theirs to build, and for the first time in a long time, they were finally home. What did you think of this story? Let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. Drop your country or city below. And if you enjoyed this journey of fate, love, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Hit that follow button so you never miss the next adventure. Thank you for watching. Your support means everything, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. See you in the next one.